What an absolute honour it is to bring to you this mixed media painting that I'm going to be doing for you today here on the National Trust Rievaulx Terrace. With a landscape that's as complex as this, what we really need to do first of all is draw the architecture. My landscapes, I don't call them landscapes, I actually call them linescapes. So with a variety of tools, we've got graphite sticks, Derwent, graphitone, which is water-soluble pencils, and all sorts of things like carbon pencils and that sort of thing between. We get the architecture right first, and that's the architecture of the landscape and the architecture of our main subject, and then we are all set to go. Now, we don't have to be finicky about the detail at this stage. It's placement, and it's looking at your composition and getting the general feel of the landscape before you become over complex and bogged down in detail, which is not what we want when we want to be expressive in drawing. Rievaulx is absolutely beautiful to me. This is an iconic placement within our landscape here, and there's excellent history about it all the way through. Keep it nice and loose all the way through our painting and drawing before we even start to even think about the major complexity of the washes and tones in it. Now, I'm working with a water-soluble stick here at the moment, and I'm just going to add a little bit of snow into my picture, and I'll show you how I can use the snow itself. I like to include quite a lot of the environment, to be honest with you, and I'm just going to use some of the snow, which is like that water soluble, to sort of like melt some of this graphite on here and give me some actually added texture. I do this with water anyway, but the snow, I don't know, it's the particles in the snow or the particular content of it. And then here, as I work with the graphite stick like this building into this kind of environment, letting all those kind of like looseness of all those marks work in, and it's joyous. When the light fluctuates and changes, what I do, I concentrate mainly on all the architectural shapes. It comes back again, I can see it behind the cloud. So you don't worry about this idea of it becoming like lost and found with the cloud and ooh, the light's all shifting and changing. You know, focus back on this. That's fab. The very thin lines as much as these chunky marks, and this harder pencil as well, this graphite stick here, will actually create indents into the surface. So it's a technique called sgraffito, to scratch, and the trails of the marks, these expressive marks of all these fantastic mixtures of trees and, you know, nature down here. Line is king. It's beautiful. What I've created here in this is hard graphite, and then as I drag the soft graphite stick across the top, you're building layers and textures. And you do this thing here around the trees, which is called negative painting. And it's like a pastel in its own right. This little tiny piece of broken graphite stick here. And it gives immense power and control. Right, working with some liquid graphite now, just going to dilute it. So this is a product by Wallace Seymour, a northern company. But if you put that together as a solid form from the jar, which is really quite gorgeous to work with, if I keep adding dilution to this, I'll get tints, which I've got here. And also I've got that in other form at this end, which is a very soft Derwent XL blocks in charcoal. I've diluted some of that as well within the wash. I like to dampen off my sheet so I can keep my marks fluid, deep, rich tones. Start daining up the painting. We don't worry if marks run. It's this placement of tone which is of paramount importance on which we can build. Draw with the brush as well as paint with it at the same time. And using this almost undiluted liquid graphite, I'm able to really accelerate quite a lot of the foreground mark making. Use the brush to paint with, and don't be lazy with your brushes. That's very, very important. Switch brushes. Use every brush to your best advantage. I'm using one of my all-time favorite brushes here, which is a sword liner. Again, this sword liner is by Pro Arty, and picking up all this fantastic diluted mixture, I'm able to get lots of gorgeous expressive marks for this winter landscape here. So I'm turning to use a black tone now. I've got a dilution of Quink ink in here, which splits with water to go blue and offer brown tones, so it will complement our painting brilliantly. The point of the brush naturally allows a wonderful point of line contact, and because I've soaked this in this particular area, in the background there are fantastic trees, whole bunches of them, you know, forests basically in the background. But the tints, we're using aerial perspective because it's further away. This dilution on here where it's wet and the gravity create the effect of the trees very easily. Diluted mixes of charcoal to create real dense, also painted marks that mimic that ink that I've just been applying. And using different types of brushes, I can get the different types of textures and marks and half tones and graphitones between. Every mark that I've applied counts and is extraordinarily expressive in the build. But here, if I take darker mix in there, load the brush, I will create very dense lines. And if you bat the brush on the edge, you get it like a chisel, and that will create another kind of line mark. And then rolling the brush will also create a different technique. So dark and light, light and dark, saving the white of the paper to create the snow rather than thinking about using white on the surface. And then here, for example, I'm just going to run a really nice sharp line with that brush to sort of put back where the abbey I thought was like losing it. Building up a lot of these dark winter tones at the moment. I love the way the trees vignette the abbey, either side of it. Cut across, connect to the landscape. Let that brush find its way through the landscape, mindful of the way the others from the other side overlap in different tones. Here's a lighter tone now. It casts a real difference, up and out, pointing towards the top. Look at the echo of this. We don't see the tree trunk on this side, but it's certainly expressed there. We know where it's coming from. This side belongs to another tree over here. Thicker mark again here. Gorgeous to bring that back in. Work across the top of these others again in that layer. Switch back and forth. Keep your painting developing all the way throughout. Don't just focus on one area. So I'm going back to my abbey now again and building up all these different types of tones I see at the bottom here, and shaping and just finishing off a whole range of line strokes, lines in here. The ruined marks. It's all about layering. It's all about thinking ahead when you're painting. It's not just that mark that you're making now, it's what you're going to bring to the party later. Now that those little grey marks that we had achieved before allow me to put these washes in. Not in this area because there's a view through that window. So close observation teaches you where to place things. Liquid graphite here. This is particles of graphite that's been dissolved in water, and that creates gorgeous tints. So let me just show you how that works in this abbey down here. So using this connoisseur brush, looking at all the streaks of the light all the way through the abbey there, I'm going to bring some of those lines through the base because I'm going to work on the top of these again with lighter kind of marks. And then the fantastic shadow that works at the base and then around here. And this is a transparent wash, which is like the shadows we see from the abbey. I'm using a pearlescent medium now. This is acrylic ink mixed with a tiny bit of brown will give a pearlescent look to the landscape, and it's just kind of lovely to layer, and it'll shimmer when the light is already doing that here in this sort of area as the sunlight catches it. So what I'm going to use now, I'm going to use some of this lapis blue. This is again a liquid graphite, and in its tone as it is at the moment you can see how heavy that is, but when it's diluted it creates a gorgeous wash. And I'm just mixing it because I know that the pigments, because it's a heavy pigment, most of the good stuff is in the bottom. So if I take that brush and put it into a container and dilute it, then I will create a wonderful media that I can use as a wash effect. So we're going to use plenty of it. So I'm going to add into there some water, and that will dilute it and make a fabulous wash, and that's what we're going to be putting on next. So I'm able to follow the lay of the land and look at all the big shadow effects. A little bit more water when needed. And that little dilution creates a tint, a glaze, where you get shadows that pass across the landscape, especially in that big green field at the back there, and that lovely effect. My own shadow is helping. See here, the eye will always follow the direction of the stroke, so the columns themselves are curving. So as I use my brush, I curve my brush. See this lovely marking in here, this half tone. And then I go back to our main column here, which is in shadow. Working that brush in those layers and glazes, you get to see with the liquid graphite, which is quite transparent, you get to see all the wonderful marks that I first applied. So some of my final marks here in the field are going to be using these wonderful tools here. These are Derwent's charcoal XL blocks, and who'd have thought that charcoal is also white? Now the white will create these amazing textural responses. I understand that there's no other whites than the white of the paper, but these will give me halftones. These will give me texture. That's what we're going to just focus on now, show you how those textural effects are going to bring sections of the painting so beautifully together, and that will be the final marks I will be doing here in the field. Looking at where the marks are on the dry sheet, they're using the heel of the brush. We can put very juicy, thick kind of marks in. They celebrate where the snow has been lying on the surface, and I'm not too fussed if any of the media on the surface is still wet, because that gives me again a much more natural interflow between my media. Now I'm very, very aware. I'm watching everything that I see in front of me, and just not just getting held by technique. I'm actually responsive to what I actually see in the landscape. Here's a great piece, and put that heel down on there and put a very solid mark all the way through and back again and just back away. So here it goes into textural tone, into the other marks, and it's building up something that's really painterly, drawn at the same time, and so on. In this area here, the liquid graphite will respond to a contrast to a textural mark with the XL block. Delicate marks as well will create very, very thin marks and lines. And then we've got where the abbey finishes. I don't want to lose that line. We have another tree that's here that needs to be included. All these little details will be finished in the studio, but for now the main build is this. Now I'm going to make this house here pop by bringing where the snow has caught the roof. Now I'm going to use the flat of it and bring that together with a little bit of pressure on there and direction, so that that roof line stands clean. Final marks. So we can actually see how our painting, if I stand back from it now, and I'm really pleased that it's been able to capture so much of the essence of this landscape here directly outdoors, so that I'll be able to take this as a firm foundation and build on it for a completed piece in the studio, using my reference, but more than that, the thoughts of being here, absorbing everything that surrounds me, has gone into my soul. And because it has, when it goes into the studio, using those photographs of a prompt, it is actually going to be a stronger and better painting for it. So it's literally hats off to this landscape, and hats off to Yorkshire, and hats off to you.